am the events committee chair. I am the events committee chair for our reading league. We're so excited to have Dr. Archer with us. Just want to do a few housekeeping things here. Let you know what our mission in the South Carolina version of the Reading League is. We're really here to advance awareness, understanding, and use of evidence-aligned reading instruction across South Carolina, but also across the country by connecting all of our stakeholders in order to ensure equitable literacy instruction for all students. To accomplish our mission, we concentrate our efforts around education, collaboration, and advocacy by offering sessions like the one we have today. Our hope is that we're able to bring together all of our stakeholders by providing information about how far we've come, where we are right now, and where we're headed. As members, we all play a vital role in helping us to reflect on where we've been and creating the vision of where we want to go in South Carolina and ensuring a positive environment for everybody there. I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Archer if you don't already know about Dr. Archer. Dr. Archer is an educational consultant to state departments and school districts on explicit instruction and literacy. She has presented in all 50 states, all U.S. territories, and many countries, including Australia and Canada, and is the recipient of 10 awards honoring her contributions to education. Dr. Archer has served on the faculties of 3 universities, including University of Washington, University of Oregon, and San Diego State University. She has co-authored numerous curriculum materials, including Phonics for Reading, which I think is the newest one. Is that not correct, Dr. Archer?
It's the revision is new. Yes, it's
okay. A 3-level intervention program, Rewards, a 5-component literacy intervention program, and a best-selling textbook titled Explicit Instruction, Effective and Efficient Teaching through Guilford Publications. We are very excited to welcome Dr. Archer. Dr. Archer, I'm going to stop my share and let you go ahead and share your screen. If everybody would turn their cameras off now so we make sure we have enough bandwidth, and we will be getting these slides out to you following our event this morning. All right? Thank you and welcome, Dr. Archer.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. And let me just do one more thing. Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you. It was good to meet many of you. And I'm really honored, even though it's only 7:07 here in Portland, Oregon. But you're worth it. You are making a difference and you are putting in huge energy to make a difference in your district for all of the learners there. So let me tell you, in this webinar, because we're not together, we know that good instruction requires active participation. So here are some of the things that you are going to do. And I know most of you are at home, but you're going to talk out loud. So one thing you're going to do is when I ask a question, I will many times signal you to say the answer together. So for example, what day of the week is it? Everybody, it is Saturday, right?
Saturday.
Yes, and so you're going to say it, but you'll stay muted. And sometimes we'll read things together. So we'll do choral reading, but it's just a reminder to us that good instruction is always interactive. I say something, you say something, I do something, you do something. That's the absolute rhythm of a good classroom. And it's necessary if we're going to teach students the varied skills involved in very good reading with excellent comprehension. So we're sending you the slides because there might be some slides that you want to pluck out and utilize in presentations to a school site, and you are very welcome to do that. And So I always put the description in just to be certain that I am staying on target for what we are doing. So the South Carolina Language Arts Standards, which are new to your state, relatively new, and in it was this statement as a precursor to the standards in language arts. And you're going to read with me and follow the cursor and begin. Students need word recognition and language comprehension, stopping there for a moment, so that your state was honoring the simple view of reading, that on one hand we have word recognition and the other we have language comprehension, taught systematically, which we'll explore, and explicitly in every grade. However, the instructional emphasis on each component changes as students become proficient readers.
Good. I'm sorry, Dr. Archer, I'm sorry to bother you. It's Susie. Could you share your slide screen?
Ah, that's why.
I know, it's so much.
Well, I know, but we had it up and then took it down.
Yeah, and then we switched it. Yes, ma'am.
No problem. Okay, let's try again. Thank you for saying that. It was hard for you to read along when you didn't have it. Thank you. We are perfect now, except for just one thing.
Oh, they are recording. Okay.
Yes.
I think you have to lean over here to my computer. Excellent. Now, are we perfect, Susan?
We are perfect, Dr. Archer.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to go back here a little bit, and we're going to read it one more time, because this is going to set the tone for our time together. This time, I'm going to read. When I stop, you say the next word. Right. So that's called close reading. And we did a study in middle school that found that kept many kids on task. So follow the cursor, and students need word recognition and language comprehension taught systematically and explicitly in every grade. However, the instructional emphasis on each component changes as the students become proficient. All right, so we're going to explore these two words in it, systematically and explicitly. So first of all, when we talk about systematic instruction, the first thing that occurs that's critical is that we teach critical content in the area of language arts across the grades. So we pick out what is the most critical, and we pick out the things that by research we know makes a difference. And we toss aside things that aren't going to make a difference, so that we have time to ensure that the students learn these areas, which we're going to review for you in a moment. And then we break them down into obtainable pieces. Research is very clear on that, is that it has to be something that we can obtain and not have cognitive overload, like too much is coming in. And it needs to be sequenced logically. So in my mind, these are the major elements of the term systematic: critical content, broken down, sequenced logically. And hopefully your curriculum materials, and this is the kind of thinking to be taken to looking at new curriculum materials, as we had a principal, Peggy, who said, yeah, we're going to be doing that soon. So ask yourself, does it teach what the science of reading would suggest? Is it broken down and sequenced logically? So one model, which is alluded to in this statement, is the simple view of reading. And I know the level of competency of the people that are on this webinar But let's just go back and review this for a moment. So in Goff's simple view of reading, we have word recognition, decoding, the ability to read the words, times language comprehension, which would be, would you understand expressive language orally, and would lead to reading comprehension. And so if I was unable to read the words, but had excellent language and background knowledge and verbal language, I still would not have reading comprehension. And if the reverse was true, that I had excellent decoding skills, but didn't couple it with the background knowledge of verbal comprehension, then I would have no reading comprehension. So it is telling us that both of these are necessary. And notice that it also said that it should be taught across the grade levels. So I really like these slides, which you're going to get, because they show directly when you're going to be teaching the various areas under word recognition, decoding, and when they would be emphasized. So let's just look at these, bring you all up to date, which I sure is a review. So the students in pre-K and K need print concepts. They need to be able to say the names of the letters. They need other concepts like we read left to right, we top to bottom. And very importantly, and some of you said you're really working on this with your kindergartners, that, let me just get that. I'm trying to remember the person's name who said they were working as a coach at a kindergarten to teach them phonemic awareness. And all of us are aware of the two big parts, two major skills in phonemic awareness. And one of them is the ability to hear sounds and blend them into a word as an auditory skill. So if, for example, if I said, listen, I'm going to say a word slowly, then you say the word man. What word? And you would say, did you say it? Man. And then also that you could segment a word into sounds. So let's say, put up 3 fingers, students, and the word is man. What word? Man. Touch the fingers as you say each sound. What sound? What sound? Ah. What sound? And the word is man. So the students have to be able to manipulate sounds, blending them together in a word, segmenting the word, and in some cases, more advanced skills in phonemic awareness. And then this is what we've often forgot that we should teach. It is amazing to me when I reflect back on many of the years where we didn't teach phonics at all. We didn't teach decoding at all. But that is actually, we have an alphabetic language, as you well know, and those letters and the combination of letters and graphemes basically are the hint, the cue to being able to read. Then I look at those letters and I say the sound. So that means that we're teaching letter sound associations. We're teaching students to decode single syllable words. We're teaching them to read multisyllabic words. We are teaching decoding. We are also teaching longer words with morphemes within them, like prefixes and suffixes and roots, so that they could read the words. But they also need to get to the point of automaticity. And all of us have talked about the term fluency. It starts with I am accurate, and then I become automatic at it. I have many sight words, I recognize them immediately, and I have expression. So notice, for all of you who are at the elementary level, that these areas are firmly taught in K5. And in terms of decoding, as you go through all the way, we have a high school English teacher here. The students still need to learn to pronounce words that are unfamiliar with them. And They need to continue to gain automaticity, which means that they have sight vocabulary. They recognize the words instantly, like you look at any page, you recognize it instantly. But I think this one does a very good job reminding us that here we have novices who don't have background knowledge, who are learning the information. And we know from the research on instruction that those students who particularly benefit from very explicit instruction are students who are novices. But I could even have a high school student that is a novice in terms of some vocabulary words that they don't know, and then that still would need to be directly taught. Now let's look at the other coin of this, because if we just do the ability to read the words, and we're not teaching kids vocabulary and background knowledge, then they will not be able to put that together for comprehension. So when we break down the language comprehension, do the students have the ability to understand oral language, including vocabulary? And look at that. We're going to be teaching vocabulary all the way till graduation. And do they have the necessary background knowledge on a topic so they can understand it and also make inferences, which you have to have knowledge to make inferences. And again, that's going to continue all the way through. Even down here in pre-K and K, we need to be reading information books aloud to children. Most researchers in that area, like Susan Newman, would say at least half of the books that are read aloud to children in pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade should be informational texts. So they're gathering up background knowledge. They're getting smart so that when they read something, they have more probability of understanding it. And then we're going to have listening comprehension, which is generally taught by having students respond to something that has been said, because you can't really measure listening by watching the kids, but you can from their responses. Isn't that useful? So we'll thank Sarah Vaughn and Kim St. Martin for developing this. But then some of you might be utilizing within your school site the reading rope. And the reading rope also broke down what we needed in terms of word recognition and language comprehension. And I love this one because this is very well known, and yet it also would tell you this is the place where we're going to teach print concepts, pre-K and K, and we're going to have phonological awareness that we teach particularly in pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade, and then it becomes a part of our very complex skills in reading. Same with phonics, we teach it through fifth grade, but then the kids continue to learn more about it as they refine their skills, but then it becomes a part of the rope. So either one of these models reflect your standards, but they also indicate what grades we would be emphasizing them in. And again, the big point here is these are novice readers going to being more fluent and automatic to skilled readers. All right, so we had systematic. It is having first critical content. And both of these models articulate for us what is critical content. And then that it be broken down. Sequenced in a way that made sense. So I just took one study that was done by Doug Carnine, Jerry Silbert, and Ed Kamanui at the University of Oregon, where I also taught. And they did research on what should the sequence of sounds be. And they said, you cannot come up with an exact, you must do it this way, but there are the kinds of things we should look for in terms of any sequence. So let's just review those. We would have high frequency to low frequency. Okay, let's just look up here. So very common, very common, not so much with Z. So they've arranged this from high frequency to low frequency. And also, we're conscious of easy to difficult. For example, the letter A is what we call a continuous sounds. All vowels are continuous, meaning you can hold them without distorting it. And the letter M is continuous. So that when we decode a word with continuous sounds, it's much easier to blend those sounds together. But then we have the letter T, very high frequency, but it's a stop sound. And it occurs in many words. And so it was introduced here, but we have to be careful to pronounce it, not ta. One day I was testing a child, and the word that he was reading was tip. And so he said ta, if, pa, ta, ipa. And I said, what word? He said, well, ta, ipa. Okay. That's because he was taught where someone didn't treat it like a stop sound, but added a vowel to it. So, and confusing items would be separated. For example, you would not teach the letter I, in the same lesson with unless you wanted many children to need remediation. So we separate those that are going to be confusing. So this is an example of critical content broken down and sequenced logically. You don't have to use this exact sequence at all, but the big ideas check out anytime you're looking at a curriculum material. Okay, and then just another example. So this came from the work of Louisa Moats, so she broke this down into syllable types, which the most important thing is that it makes a difference in terms of the sound of the vowel. And so instead of teaching all possibilities, all different patterns, it was broken down systematically, going from easy to difficult, from highly frequent to less frequent. So, well, now, the other part of that saying was you needed to have systematic instruction and explicit instruction. So my work has been for the last 50 years on instruction, looking at the research on it, and we have 50 years of research on instruction. What makes a difference in terms of how we teach? And so I'm going to share with you the major findings, which in the book that Susan showed you, Explicit Instruction, Effective and Efficient Teaching, we organized that book around. And I'm going to, however, recognizing your experience, just the fact that a Saturday you're giving time to this shows me your dedication to our careers. So I'm breaking it down into what we know in terms of critical elements, but then how we might have to polish it. So if I'm going to teach letter sound associations, or I'm going to teach phonemic awareness, or I'm going to teach sound out of word, or I'm going to teach a vocabulary, or I'm going to teach a background knowledge, not surprising, expert teachers tend to have very organized and focused lessons. So basically, in every content area where there is critical content, we need to teach organized and focused lessons because the students have more probability of gaining that information. And then one of my concerns is that we often have moving through our country an emphasis more on discovery, and the challenge with that is that discovery sounds really lovely, that we base it on the wealth of knowledge of the students and their intelligence, and they would discover it. But there's always two coins to discovery. And you discover it and you don't. And also, discovery is not terribly efficient. And teaching it directly is very efficient, and we don't have forever time. Now, as the students become experts, that is the place where more inquiry would be very feasible. But for the kind of knowledge that we're talking about, particularly in pre-K through 5, it better be taught pretty explicitly. So what would that entail? Well, not surprising. When we look at the research on it, particularly as summarized by John Hattie, it appears that telling the kids the goal of the lesson is useful. And so that we tell them, today we are going to be reading words with the letters OA, and our goal is to read these words accurately and quickly, so the students know what the purpose is. Now, actually, you as teachers know there's another reason to state the purpose, because then you know where you're going and the students know where you're going. Now, during the pandemic, one of the things that occurred is I usually travel a great deal, and it was not a good traveling time, but I had some major federal grants across the country that needed to go forward. And so I ended up doing not just a few webinars, more than 500 webinars with these different states of Hawaii and Alaska and Ohio and Michigan. And I also watched more than 200 videos of teachers teaching. And as we watched these and analyzed them and gave feedback to the teachers, we found that one thing we have to be certain is that, like all teaching that's done explicitly, that we have clarity, that the wording in our goals are student-friendly, the terminology is known. For example, I wouldn't say to students, today we're going to learn the grapheme-phoneme connection between the letters O-A and the sound O. Now, because not all that terminology is known. They know what letters are, so I would utilize that term. And the students need to be involved. Maybe they're going to read it or you're going to ask a question. So after you've stated the goal, you say, what letters are we focusing on? 2 of them, yes, O-A. And the sound for OA is O. What sound? O. So that they are involved. They might read it with the teacher, or we could respond to questions. And then we need to go back and revisit it during the lesson. And so let's read some words with OA. What sound? O. Put your finger under the first word. So we're going to revisit it so that they know what the intent is. And this one is really important, and that is in the research that has been done on instruction, one of the critical elements was that the teacher at the beginning of the lesson would go back and review content that they've already had. And in reviewing that content, they would open the doors to more learning because the students would already have background knowledge in their memory. But here is the question, how to do that review. So what we found is many teachers did what we would call a recap review, where they would simply go through what they had taught. And so, for example, let me give you a high school example. So the students were going to read a story that was written right after the Civil War, and the background knowledge, she went through and read the story, which is great, and picked out what background knowledge on the Civil War did you have to know to understand that passage. And so then she went through that information. So at the beginning of class, she said, this is a story right after the Civil War about an incident that really did occur during the Civil War. And there's many things that you already learned in your American history class that are going to be important here. For example, you'll have to know the difference between the Union and the Confederacy, and the North and the South. You have to know. And so there she went on. And the problem is, with a recap review, the students aren't responding. The teacher is giving information, but some of the students will go into, I believe, many of them, you can't see it, but you know they've gone there into cognitive floating. So what did that teacher need to do? Well, what the teacher needed to do in review is have retrieval practice, where the students have to retrieve the information from memory. And that would mean actively engaging them. So for example, when I modeled it for the teacher, we had slides up, and the first one said, what are the two groups in the Civil War? Write it down. And then we showed them a slide, and they checked out Confederacy and Union. And which one was in the North? Write it down. And then we put it on the slide. They checked it out. It was the North. And so we asked questions that brought out the information. So one of the critical things was that they had to be involved in it, and it needed to utilize retrieval practice, not just a recap, but getting them to retrieve it. This is a term that has really been focused on in terms of instructional research lately, because if you retrieve the information, you are much more likely to recall it. Now, you know that even in your adult life. You go to a event and you meet someone and you really want to remember their name, and in your head, you say, Susan, 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 Susan. And then later, you're saying, Susan, are you enjoying this party? So you've used retrieval practice to rehearse it, to increase the memory of that information. So in your own classes, start out by, instead of doing a recap review, start out with retrieval practice review. So we have told the students the goal, and we looked at any information that they need to be successful in this lesson's background knowledge, and we've reviewed it, but we've reviewed it with retrieval practice. And I want to tell you at the end, we will have questions. And if you want to put questions in the chat box, then I'll have Susan or Janice bring up the questions at the end. All right, good. Okay, now, probably if I am known for anything, it is the adoption of 3 terms. I do it, we do it, you do it. Back in 1974, and I believe some of you were not born at that time, but I was writing a chapter in a book, and it was talking about teaching skills and strategies. What do we know about it? And at that time, Madeline Hunter, a very excellent researcher in California on instruction, talked about demonstration, guided practice, and checking for understanding. And my goal was to be certain that I could make this more memorable. So demonstration is I do it, and guided practice is we do it, and checking for understanding is you do it. But now I do it, we do it, you do it is somewhat ubiquitous. It is like everywhere. So let's look at what needs to happen when we're demonstrating something, because we could demonstrate it in a way that wasn't clear, wasn't broken down so the students could see the steps, and then the probability of retaining it might be quite low. So what do we need to do to make it a dynamic demonstration? So basically, it is show and tell. And so whatever I am going to teach, maybe I'm teaching you how to form a letter. Maybe I'm teaching you how to sound out a word. Maybe I'm teaching you a strategy that has many steps. For example, a strategy that we taught in rewards for reading long words is that the students would circle the prefix, circle the suffix, underline the vowels. Then they would say the parts in the word and make it a real word. Circle the prefix, circle the suffix, underline the vowels, say the parts in the word, make it a real word. So I need to show and tell them those steps. But I'm also going to have it broken down, what I'm teaching, into small steps. And I'm going to exaggerate those steps. And I'm going to be very, very clear. So basically, a demonstration is I'm going to show you how to do it, and simultaneously, I'm going to tell you what I am doing. But think about this in your own adult life, how you ask someone how to do something, and they say, well, you just do da, 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 da. And you want to say, no, come on, break it down into
I don't like it either.
Take me step by step,
Okay.
and have clarity. Thank you for muting. So you can sort of watch your own demonstrations to be certain this is true. Now, this one is a really critical note because we have I do it, we do it, you do it. And when we watch the videos, the majority of them, no matter if they were teaching reading skills or science or they were teaching mathematics, they went from I do it to you do it. And yet the most powerful part is the we do it, where I take you through it step by step. So the dynamic demonstration is followed by we do it, guided practice. And so I'm going to use that example. And I hope you have paper in front of you. Maybe you do. Okay, on it, would you write down the word unmanageable? So let's pretend that I have demonstrated the strategy. So the first step is I look at the word and I underline any prefixes. And what prefix? Yes, un. And then I look at it and I ask myself, is there a suffix? And you say, yes, a bull. It's pronounced a bull, right? And then I underline the vowel sounds in rest of the word. What sound? Ah. And then I underline the vowel sounds. And here it's A and E together. What sound? A. And next we say the parts of the word. And my turn. Unmanageable. And what word? Unmanageable. And so I would demonstrate it to the students probably 1 or 2 times, and then I'm going to guide them and lead them in doing it. So on your paper, write down in important. So as I wrote that down, my pen has no ink in it. So let me change pens here. I have abundance. Okay, so if I guided you in it, I would say, what's the first step? We circle the prefixes. Yes. Does this word have a prefix? Yes. What prefix? Yes. Un. Does it have another prefix? Depends on what I've taught them, but another prefix would be im. And does it have a suffix? Yes. And what is it? Unt. And what vowel sound? Or. Excellent. Now say the parts. Un, im, port, unt. Say it again. Unimportant. So I would guide them through it. And I might have a lot of guiding. Because some of you said you taught special ed students, students with reading difficulties, students with dyslexia, and the big difference in teaching those students is the amount of we do it. So we're going to have expanded we do it, and it's guided practice. Our whole goal in doing it is to increase their success. And it has to be very clear. And so that, again, they're processing all of the steps, but you're guiding them. What's the first step? Do it. What's the next step? Do it. What's the next step? Do it. What's the next step? Do it. And they're going to thus have more chance of being able to apply it all together. And then we use gradual release of responsibility, meaning that first we would go through every single step, and then we can pull back and have them do more and more of it. And when the majority of students are accurate, then we can do a you do it and check their understanding. Now let me come back to differentiation because, so let's say you're teaching a group and all of you have taught enough to know that after you did we do it, redo it, you might have, let's say, 6 kids who still were not perfect at it. So then you continue and you do more, we do it, and we do it. Now it's down to 3, and then you continue doing it, and it's down to 2. And so you're going to go on to check their understanding for you do it. But the question always is, what do we do about those 2? And to me, there's only a few options. One, when I have the students begin to do it on their own, I could do focus monitoring. I'm going to go to this student and do some more we do it with them or this student. Or I could have a small group that I worked with while the others worked independently. Or I could have them work with their partner. It's only a limited number of things we can do when we do have diversity within our groups. And then the you do it is to see if they could work independently. And so they're going to do some by themselves to determine if, one, do I need to adjust the lesson? Are they ready to move to independent work? Do I need to reteach this? Do they need more guided practice? So these actually, I do it, we do it, you do it, will be excellent for you as sort of checking off when you've taught a strategy or a skill, how to do something, and you wanted to look at, well, am I polishing it up? Do I have dynamic demonstrations? I do it. Do I continue the we do it till the majority have it? And then do I check them out with you do it? All right. So now we're going to take a minute, a little change here, and we're going to watch a little bit of a video to look at the delivery of skills. And the most critical one is requesting frequent responses. So let me just pull up this video. And I knew we were going to have some secondary people here, and we do. And I just wanted to show that explicit teaching is useful for information which the students don't have background knowledge on in secondary classes. So I chose vocabulary, and on your paper, I want you to watch this and just make a note of what you think is are. Do you have a question? Thank you. Critical questions we'll answer at the end. And so you're going to write down what were some behaviors you noticed, particularly in terms of delivery. All right. So let me grab this video. And I always ask for technical prayers. All right, we're not going to watch the whole thing, but I'm going to ask Janice and Susan and Alicia and Melinda and Audrey and Melanie to take data on the number of responses that I request. Okay, so you're going to, every time I ask the students to do something, you're going to tally it. Every time I ask the students to say something or to say something to their partner, tally, tally, tally. But also, if I ask them to do a behavior such as look at me, these are called opportunities to respond. And I'm certain that you've taken this data before, but you're going to take the data and everybody else is going to write down what are critical skills embedded in the lesson. For example, do I monitor them? Okay, all right. So this is New York City. It was during a time I was doing a grant in New York City, and these are 7th graders.
So looking up here, so we're going to expand on some of our vocabulary words. And the first word is what, everyone?
Just checking. Susan, can you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, good.
Are. And part of speech, it is a verb. And read the definition. If you discard something, you get rid of it because you no longer want it or need it. Okay, so when I get rid of something and I throw it away, another word for that is what, everyone? Discard. In fact, the synonym is what, everyone? Throw away. So if I clean up this room, as you two did this morning, you cleaned it up and they found some paper and some pencils that needed to be thrown away. They did what, everyone? They discarded them. Okay, and so looking here and read it with me, everyone, and starting here. What are some things that you should discard? Okay, and so everybody be thinking for a moment of your bedroom and some things that you need to discard. And begin by saying what, everyone? I should discard. My turn first. So I have a basement that is just.
So most of these students have English as their second language. So I'm doing a little bit more support and modeling on language than I might do in another class.
Filled with old books that no one wants. It's filled with overhead transparencies that teachers don't use. I need to, what, everyone? Discard them. I have cards. Every card that's been sent to me, I'm 64. Every card that's been sent to me since I was like 5 years old, I have kept. And I have boxes and boxes of them, and I probably should discard them. Okay, and so first ones, then twos. Tell your partner something that you should discard and start with I should discard. First ones, then twos, and go.
My old shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I should discard old papers.
Absolutely.
Discard my those I don't use and give it to charity.
Excellent. Hey, looking up here and big voice your sentence.
I should discard my clothes I don't use to charity.
Excellent. So you're not going to just throw them away. You're going to discard them, get rid of them, but they're going to go to charity. Excellent. Okay, well, looking here. And again, it's the word what, everyone? Discard. And read it with me. Brainstorm with your partner what might be discarded in a landfill. And continue. Count the number of ideals that you list. Okay, my turn first. So things that could be discarded in a landfill. Food that is rotten, old papers, a toaster that's broken might be discarded in a landfill. Old letters, old cards, clothes that are all ripped up. Okay, looking with your partner and count as you go, say as many as you can, things that might be discarded in a landfill and go with your partner.
Broken things.
Broken things.
Things that don't work.
Things that don't work? Things that work? You're gonna discard them?
Things you don't wear.
Things that you don't wear anymore? Paint, yeah.
Clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Food. Tissue.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So we're gonna do whip around or pass, meaning I'm gonna start here and you're gonna say one thing that might be discarded in a landfill. And so what might be discarded in a landfill? Your plastic. I'll be back. And old toys, old computers, paper, books. What? Clothing, TVs, rotten food, yes. Okay, I'll think about it. I'll be back. What?
Trash.
Trash. Excellent. And back to you.
Glass.
Glass. Excellent. Those are all things that might be discarded. Okay, our next word is indistinct. What word, everyone? Indistinct. It is an adjective. And read the definition. If something is indistinct, it is not clearly recognized or understandable. So if it is indistinct, it's a little bit difficult to recognize or to understand. And the synonym is what, everyone? Unclear. So if I look out the window and I can't see that building over there, I could say it is what, everyone? Indistinct. Okay. If I am reading something and it's just not clear, I can't understand it, I might say, well, this passage is indistinct. If we took a photo of you today and it was all blurry, but we could sort of pick you out, we could say it is indistinct. Excellent. And so here are some examples of things that people have talked about that are a little indistinct. And read it and go. Supposedly, this is a picture of the Loch Ness Monster. Okay, and?
So, even a teacher who has really worked on teaching for many years makes errors. Like, what's the probability that seventh graders in a class for students who are gaining English would know what the Loch Ness Monster is? And I just had to look at this and say, oh, Archer, I've coached you for all these years and you did this, darn. So everything else is going well, but then another example.
Why would we say the photo is indistinct? And you're going to begin by saying, this photo is indistinct because, okay? And so twos, tell your partner, starting with this photo is indistinct because. Twos, tell your partner a sentence and go. Mm-hmm.
The colors like clear.
Okay, and tell us your sentence starting with. This photo is indistinct because.
The photo is indistinct because it is in black and white.
Okay, black and white, so it's not in color. And so then it makes it a little less distinct. And you said?
It's not clearly seen.
Okay, so start with this.
This photo is indistinct because it's not clearly seen.
Right, you can't clearly see it. Excellent. Okay, and here is another picture. And read the sentence, everyone. Why would we say that this photo is indistinct? You're going to begin by saying, everybody, the photo is indistinct because. Ones, tell your partner the answer. Mhm. Excellent. That's very clear.
Color, can't really see.
Hey, looking here, your sentence.
Oh, this photo is indistinct because it is blurry.
This photo is indistinct because it is blurry. Excellent. And our next word, one of our favorite words, is abstract. What is it? Absurd. Good job. And it is what part of speech? Adjective. And read the definition. If you say that something is absurd, you are criticizing it because you think that it is ridiculous or that it does not make sense. So when something is really ridiculous, we could say it is absurd. So if I was wearing like a Halloween costume and it was a silly, silly, silly costume, you could come up to me and say, ooh, that is pretty absurd. If I told you a story and I sort of exaggerated it and it was quite ridiculous in the end, you'd say, oh, that story is pretty absurd. And of course, the synonym is what? Ridiculous. Okay. And so looking at this photo, hey, something to protect this puppy from the rain, and read the sentence. Why, everybody, why would we call this invention absurd? And begin by saying, everyone, this invention is absurd because. Okay, now think about it for a minute. Get your sentence in mind. I'm thinking. Okay, ones first. Start with that, then twos. Tell your partner why this might be absurd. Go. Good woman.
This picture is absurd because it's long and probably the dog couldn't walk good. That's an umbrella. That's over a dog.
Yeah, I know. That is kind of absurd, an umbrella over a dog. And you said?
This invention is absurd because dogs usually don't wear anything like that.
That's right. Okay, fall silent, and your sentence.
This invention is
What?
absurd.
Absurd?
Because dogs usually don't wear anything like that.
Excellent. And your sentence.
This invention is absurd because it might be good.
It might hurt the dog. Now, when I was thinking, all of you started laughing. You thought it was ridiculous, or another word is it was absurd. Good.
Okay, we're going to stop there. And if you are one of the people that took data, I want you to count up the number of responses that were initiated from the students and divide it by 10. Okay, so do that. And the rest of you, I want you to pick out, you wrote down ideas of good practices that you noticed and put 2 in the chat box. So while all the people are figuring out the number per minute, everybody else put 2 in the chat box. And Susan, I'm going to have you watch the chat box and you're going to sort of summarize what they put in, and go.
All right, we're seeing between 3 and 4 for the numbers of opportunities I think you're going with per minute. I
Right,
see.
So
Yeah.
that in the research that's been done on very effective teachers, when the responses are fairly simple, and these were, except the partners weren't too simple, but that they would have from 3 to 5 responses per minute. So not 1 response per hour, not 1 response per period, but 3 to 5 per minute.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it seems to me with corrective feedback. I mean,
Absolutely.
so that it wasn't just I practiced independently for that long and I counted those. Some other things we noted was repeated practice, lots of opportunities to respond as a group to a partner. With it, repetition of answers, providing synonyms to tie back to previous knowledge, providing sentence frames, good pacing, whipping around or passing came up, having that respect for students, giving them that time to think, checking in with students, the sentence frames. I kept thinking about modeling the language that they should use. With it, quickly redirecting with students. Not just giving them something they didn't know, but what they did know. It was related to the instruction with it. Noticing gradual release, I do, you do, we do, repeated practice, lots of we do. Tony, that's something that stuck in my mind 2, and so many response opportunities, and practices and chance to practice and verbally interact. Everybody was engaged, total class participation, frequent response with feedback, corrective feedback. So these are the things: brisk pacing, with that content wise, the semantic practice with using the language that you used with it, some cold calls, so everybody had to be attending, high engagement, active monitoring, explicit, different types of practice opportunities and feedback.
Beautiful job,
Okay.
Susan. One more,
So,
stop there. But you must be very impressed with the knowledge of the people participating today, because they did a beautiful job.
yes, they
And
did.
as I watched it, lots of active participation and utilization of partners' core responses. So we had specific kinds of responses that were used. But I also want to stress that you called them sentence frames or sentence stems, so that they had to speak in complete sentences. So terrific. That's what we're looking for in explicit instruction. That's sort of like a little picture into it. And notice the students are engaged because they have many responses to make. They got feedback on every response. The teacher monitored them and gave them individual feedback as well as group feedback. So thank you so much, Susan, for helping us out there. And let me just get this so that we can go forward.
And somebody did ask if this clip was on your website, Dr. Archer.
No, but I will send it to you so you can send it to them. How's that?
Okay. Make notes about what we can send in our follow-up email, peeps, okay?
Right, you can definitely follow up with that because it is a useful one, particularly if you're secondary. Thanks for being patient for just a moment. So we had I do it, we do it, you do it, and we're right here. Okay, so let's talk about delivery, because I believe that delivery is something that is even more challenging in some grades. And here we had frequent responses, and we know from the research that there are many benefits of frequent responses, and we saw it in that video, that it increases on-task behavior. That was visible. It has a significant impact on achievement. The more responses you make that are correct, the more probability there is of learning, and it decreases disruptive behaviors. So all three of those make a huge difference. And so many of you are working in intervention. And if we look at what could increase the intensity of interventions, the first thing we would do is increase the opportunities to respond. So, and we have some pretty good research on what should we look for in terms of opportunities to respond. And one is that there be a balance between everyone responses and individual responses. With again, the research on very effective teachers, the majority of the responses were everyone. Everyone says it, everyone reads it, everyone writes it, everyone says it to a partner, and about 30% of them were calling on individuals, which was about the balance here. Now, someone said cold calls, and you know, it's so interesting, that term, because I've seen it used sort of a gotcha, you know, Samuel, I gotcha. And that's not what I would want to do. If you noticed, I called on students after I had taught the information, after they had time to prepare, after they'd shared it with their partner, and then I called on them. So I like to look at calling on individuals as not so much cold calls, but at least hot calls. They've been well taught, they've been monitored, they've gotten feedback, and then call on them. So now, when we look at these meta-analyses, they found that when the responses were simple, that teachers had 3 to 5 opportunities to respond. So many opportunities. If it was more complex, there were fewer, but still 1 opportunity to respond per minute, where they had to share with a partner or have a written response or solve a math problem. So we're talking about a large number of responses to rehearse the information, to retrieve the information, to practice the information, to retain the information. And in some cases, particularly at secondary, we might have very long responses, and then it might be at least 1 response every 10 minutes. Okay, so just a few notes. And this one is just a really important reminder from watching these videos that if I'm teaching explicitly, I am going to teach it before I ask questions about it. I'm not going to say, does anybody in this class know what the word absurd means? Now you think, well, why shouldn't you do that? Bring out their background knowledge. But then you're going to call on one student, and maybe they tell you a brilliant answer there, or maybe they don't, and you have to explain it. But then only 1 student have you really ensured know it. I would first teach it and then ask. So let me give you another example. So I was in a class one day where the teacher started the vocabulary lesson with, does any of you know the meaning of precipitation? And a student raised his hand and said, well, it's something under your arms. A close pronunciation, but not a close meaning. The next student said, you know, like sipping something, like sipping something. This is a habit of many teachers, but it is not a useful habit. We need to start by teaching it, then we can ask questions to verify their understanding. So it might go something like this. Be my students. This word is precipitation. What word? Precipitation. Put your hand on your desk. We're going to slow it down and say the parts of the word. Everybody, precipitation. What's the word? Yes, precipitation. So rain, snow, or hail that falls to the ground is precipitation. So rain that falls to the ground is called precipitation. Snow that falls to the ground is called precipitation. Hail that falls to the ground is called precipitation. So this would be the difference between like fishing for the answer and directly teaching it. So we could have many different kinds of responses, and the responses just have to match what you want them to do. Like I want them to read the definition, so we're going to use choral reading. I want them to say what is a synonym, and so it's a quick choral response. I want them to use language, including sentences, so I have them say the answer to their partner. Now, if we have a little time, I'm going to just tell you some reminders about some of the ones that we saw very consistently used. For example, when answers are very short and the same, the teacher could have the kids, everybody in the class, say the answer. And so this is a way to get lots of responses. But we have to only use it when the answers are short and the same. We have to have a clear signal for it. Everyone, and then they say it, or a voice term, everyone, and they say it. Could be a hand signal. It could be a voice directive. And some teachers that I've been watching have in their pocket a clicker, and they click it and the students say the response all together. And what to do if they don't respond? Well, what we found to be most useful is simply to do it again. Oh, but I need everyone. Oh, double darnette, I need everyone. I still need everyone. Pretty soon they're turning around and saying, Sarah, say it. So you get a little help from your peers. They could have partners. Now, when partners first were being used, we had sort of casual partners like turn and talk. But the research shows that a little more precision, a lot more structure would be useful on partners, which was here the case. So when the answers were long and different, I had them say it to their partner, but it was structured. I assigned them partners and their numbers were 1 and 2. So I could say 1 say the answer, then 2's respond, or 2's say the answer, then 1's respond. And so I designated them as partners, gave them a number, and I gave them jobs for both partners. So one said their sentence and then the other said the sentence. And I taught them how to say answers, that they would look at their partner, lean towards their partner, and whisper. Now, I just introduced these details to show that partners are good, but even better if we have some precision. Sometimes they're called precision partners, structured partners. And then you change them occasionally. Discussions. What do we know about discussions? Well, here's what we really know is that many class discussions have very few people that participate. So in one study, they asked teachers, now, who are the students that participate in class discussions? And they would say, boom, boom, and boom. They'd give 3 names. And consistently, teachers were able to do that. So how to get everybody involved? Well, here's a little checklist for you, that you have a question or a prompt for the discussion, and then it's structured. You present the prompt and you give kids time to write down their talking points. And this was significant because if they planned and written down talking points, they were much more likely to join in the discussion. And they shared their talking points with their partner. Now, so even if they don't join the discussion as a whole, they've already shared with their partner. And then they participate in the discussion. Individual turns. First of all, I prefer having everyone do everything. And so I'm just going to check understanding with a few students for individual responses. And I'm going to limit volunteers. In fact, one of the first things we could be doing this new school year, whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school, is have a no hand raise policy. Because who's going to raise their hands? High performing students, students that are assertive, students that are proficient in English. We have a lot of students in that class who aren't going to raise their hand. So I'm going to end up calling on the high performers, the students that are proficient in English. And it's what I call teaching the best and leaving the rest. So consider limiting volunteers. Instead, I'm going to call on volunteers, non-volunteers. I'm going to use some kind of randomization tool. For example, I might have sticks in a can and call that. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to give them time to prepare their answer. I'm going to have them share with the partner. And then I'm randomly going to call on individuals. So even things like individual responses, we can polish up. One of the research reviews found that 3 opportunities to respond really stood out as making a difference. One was choral responses, because you could ask many short questions, get lots of answers, lots of participation. And number two was that they could use holdups. So they're going to hold something up to say an answer. And that was very, very effective. The third one was guided notes, particularly in secondary classes. So I really love holdups. It could be holding up, writing on a slate, holding it up. It could be holding up their fingers. Maybe they have a list of vocabulary words numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. The teacher talks about one of them, and then the students show the number of fingers that matches the answers. Low prep, high outcome. They could have response cards that they put up in the air, maybe agree or disagree. And they could have a response sheet. There you see it. So that's one piece of paper, and they have it in their desk. They take it out, and you say, we're going to do agree and disagree. They put it at the top. You give them a statement. Do you agree or disagree with that? Put your finger on it. Now hold it up and show me. Very effective, because everybody is going to respond, and I can hold everybody in the classroom accountable. So what do we do with the response card? Well, we ask a question. The students first touch the answer on their desk, the card, or they put out their fingers on their desk. And then I say, show me, and they hold it up in the air. Now, it's so interesting, because the main reason that we put it down and then put it up in the air is so that the students don't just copy someone's response, that they try to develop their answer and show it. And then recently, I was reading an article that said, it's okay if they look around. This is about learning. And if they think, everybody else has the same answer, I'm going to change mine. Fine. It shows that they're learning. Okay. I have to constantly upgrade my thinking. So they hold it up, and then feedback. Now, you noticed in that video, every response was followed with feedback. Feedback. So immediate feedback following the responses. And then you monitor. Now, that was the other thing in that video that was extraordinarily useful. I monitored the responses. I listened carefully. I looked carefully. And in this classroom, to hear the partners, I had to circulate. And when we circulate, basically we are moving around the classroom. And I monitored all students. We took data on that. Did I stop in the course of that lesson at everybody's desk at some point? And the answer was yes. But I did have an extra emphasis on struggling students. Like the last girl, I asked a question as just emerging with English, so I did some prompting with her. And then you monitor academic responses. What are their answers? You're monitoring if they if they understand the task, and you're monitoring for behavior and for task completion. So monitoring is very central to explicit instruction. I've modeled it. I've guided you in doing it. I've checked your understanding. And during that, I've asked many responses, and I'm constantly monitoring. And I'm adjusting the lesson based on it. Ooh, they need more practice. And I'm giving feedback. So every time I request a response, then I'm giving feedback to strengthen your learning. And they're very clear feedback to the entire group or to individuals as I'm circulating. But while I'm circulating, I am quiet and private. I don't have to announce what I'm giving to every child as I go from desk to desk. And the form, I've got to watch our time here. So notice here that I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. And so you get to read about feedback on your own, but the pace was perky. I was prepared. I used routines. Every vocabulary word I taught in the same steps so I could have a perkier pace. When I got a response, I moved on. And I was not overly verbose and no digressions. And the last one here is, so I have told you the goal. I have reviewed pre-skills that you need. I am teaching you with a dynamic demonstration and utilizing I do it, we do it, you do it. While you are being taught, I'm getting lots of responses. I'm monitoring those responses. I'm giving feedback and have a very perky pace. But there also is a need for practice. There's 3 kinds of practice that are particularly research validated. One is deliberate practice. So I tell you exactly why you're going to be practicing it. And retrieval practice, where you have to retrieve the information from memory. And by retrieving it from memory, not just always replicating what I've said, then you're increasing your retention and having it spaced over time. So someone asked, well, what's included in explicit instruction? Well, all of those things are included. So let's just do a little review. And follow the cursor. The lessons are organized and, yes, focused. There is a clear lesson goal. You review prior knowledge and skills. And if it's a skill or strategy, you're going to do I do it, we do it, you do it. And you're going to have delivery with frequent responses. You're going to monitor those responses and provide feedback that tells how you might improve your work, might give praise for what you've done, or might provide a correction for an error. And you're going to have abundance of practice to be certain that it is in permanent memory. That's when learning has occurred. I just popped this in. This summer, I was doing a week-long conference in Montana. And a person who had watched me speak many times said, I had my designer make this a little chart of archerisms that sort of get to some of the things we've talked about. And this one is, to me, central. How well I teach equals how well they learn. That if students are doing very well, I can say, oh gosh, Archer, good job teaching it. If they are doing poorly, I have to say, ooh, I've got to look at my instruction and change my instruction so it's strong enough that they will get this. And during that instruction, I would use I do it, we do it, you do it. And during that instruction, I would get lots of responses. Learning is not a spectator sport. And everyone does everything. Everyone says it to their partner, everybody writes it down. So that I just put as a bonus there of some archerisms, which I just use to sort of summarize big ideas. The most critical one here for explicit instruction, though, is how well I teach equals how well they learn. Now, I know that our time is almost up, but I'm going to hang out here for a few minutes. So do we have any questions that popped in?
Hi, Dr. Archer. I'm going to pop up just our slides at the end too, but there were a few things that did pop up. One was about the practice of, let's say I give a definition. A digraph is, is 2 letters that work together to make one sound, and then having kids kind of repeat that back to you. You consider that an opportunity to respond. Am I correct?
Yes. So yes, an opportunity to respond literally was the research on it was done so that we could measure the students' engagement through the number of responses they made. So I said, what's the word? And they said digraph. That is a response. And if I told them the definition, and it is 2 letters that make 1 sound. So the 2 letters make how many sounds? 1. That would be another one.
Okay.
So yes.
It's making sure we structure our questions where the students can give us the responses that are accurate.
Right.
Okay. In the practice of increasing these opportunities to respond, is there a way to capture who isn't getting it?
Well, certainly if you're monitoring,
Mhm.
that would be the purpose of monitoring, so that, or asking for responses would be to have an idea of those students that who need more practice or more explicit input.
Mhm.
So yes, their responses is going to be the only indicator if they're getting it or not getting it, if they need more work on it or not.
Right. And then I had another one. At the very beginning, you were talking about having learning goals, communicating learning goals to students. And I feel like in education, we have a learning target related to the standard and unpack that standard. Is that what you mean by a learning goal, or is that not a best practice?
Well, so that the standards are quite general and broad, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you break it down into the pieces that you're going to teach in order to get there. For example, you have a standard in writing where the students are going to write a paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that has a lot into it. So you say, well, I'm going to break it down. And so first I'm going to teach them. We have a plan for writing it, because say you're going to
Mm-hmm.
write a paragraph, they have to plan, then they have to write, and then they have to revise and they have to edit. It's woo. That's already broken down. Now the plan. So we're going to read something, and on the plan, first thing we're going to do is write down 3 critical ideas from that in our summary. So that's the first thing I'm going to teach is we've read it. Let's learn how to pick out what is most essential and how to write it on our plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to teach them how to write a topic sentence. Now that's going to take a good deal of instruction. But then we're going to be able to add that to our plan, and then a closing statement. So I'm just breaking this down into, so the goal, you have a standard, but it would be broken into teachable parts,
Mm-hmm.
teachable chunks, and those chunks would have a goal in the lesson.
Mm-hmm. And maybe more than one day. Okay.
Definitely more than one day. You're not going to write a paragraph in a day. So we've tried
Right.
it, and it hasn't been
Right.
successful.
Mm-hmm. I've got one more question from the group, and then Melanie wants to expound on one. And then we're going to kind of wrap up tell people about our future events too. So if you guys got a few more minutes, I don't want to ignore your time. Is we had somebody ask about, are there any recommendations or modifications you would make to the explicit lesson structure when you're dealing with students who have maybe intellectual disabilities?
So probably the best for these special ed teachers who are serving these children.
Uh-huh.
I mean, look at the research on teaching children who do have processing or intellectual deficits.
Right.
Every study would show the importance of explicit instruction.
Mm-hmm.
I do it, we do it, you do it is going to be used with them. It's going to maybe be broken down into smaller points, smaller chunks that you're teaching them. And you might have more we do it, more we do it, more we do it, more we do it before they've got it down, and then they do you do it. But the basic structure of instruction doesn't change, but the amount of emphasis on practice does.
Okay. And then Melanie wanted to expound on her question, so I wanted to let her have an opportunity to do that.
I would love Melanie to expound on her question.
So, Dr. Archer, when we, as practitioners, look across our room of students who are practicing what we've crafted for them, to somehow take away and quantify that data, because you're making so many decisions in those moments, about who to move into, about who to come back to, about who's getting it, who's not. You're making a gazillion decisions. And so as that lesson wraps up and you want to make mental note of, who do I need to come back to tomorrow? Who needs more is there a way, is there an archerism practice that you have that helps you remember what you need to do next and with whom?
So first of all, if we watch that video all the way through, we taught 4 vocabulary words, and then I had an exercise that checked all their understanding. And so I wrote the words down, numbered them, and I said, I'm thinking of a word that means not easily seen. What word is it? And they would find the word, and they would hold up their fingers. And I would particularly hone in on this with this group so that I could get some feedback of their learning throughout that lesson. Now, would I write down like the student's name that I needed to work with? Yes. I might keep a record of that. What often happens is that you have some students that are pretty consistent. Got it, didn't. Got it, didn't. And so then you say to yourself, what am I going to do with that student? And one of the things that have been looked at, particularly at the University of Oregon, is the power of teaching pre-teaching. So I might have 3 students that are having difficulty, though the placement is appropriate for them. The work we're doing is appropriate for them, but they need more practice. And it appears that doing that practice before the lesson is even stronger than doing it after, because then when I come in, then I will be stronger in the whole group lesson. So that's what I would do here. There are 3 students in this class who are merging English, and the teacher, we talked over it. She's going to meet with them 5 minutes before the lesson, and is going to just work on the pronunciation and the meaning of the words that's going to be introduced. So the practice is coming before, so they'll do stronger in the lesson.
Thank you.
You know, what you showed is, of all kinds of work that we do, this one requires being very present, not looking at your phone, not answering phone calls, not checking out who got Wordle today, but being totally present and making those decisions constantly. And you absolutely gave the best question as you are teaching. Did they get it? Did they get it? Did they get it? Did they get it? Did you go on? If they don't, you go back.
Yeah, so I've been working with a couple of schools because they've brought on a new curriculum that is very explicit and requires a very quick pace. And so they are working on the way that they're delivering the practice. And because teachers are so involved in trying to make their practice deliberate, they're not necessarily watching the students and taking away, there's an implementation dip. In other words, they're not necessarily, they're looking at themselves more than they're looking at kids. And
well, that makes sense, because if I'm a new teacher and I've got a new curriculum, then I'm a learner.
Correct.
Not at automaticity. So when you've taught it many years, you get automaticity, then you can put your cognition on the students. But what they would need to do is have something formal at the end of every lesson to check with fidelity, did they get it?
Exactly. And so I was trying to think of, like, I would just probably have my student roster on the left and just blanks on the right. And I think I would probably just, if I were Anita Archer in your classroom, I'd have my roster. And right after that practice time, I would just be putting some symbols over to the students that I feel like I probably need to go back to, and keep it simple.
Hey guys, I could sit here and talk with Dr. Archer all day, and I know Melanie wants to about her practice, but I do want to wrap up the session and be very cognizant of people's time. With that. So let me do a couple of things that will, and then anybody who wants to stay on, if Dr. Archer is willing to stay on, we will do that for a few more minutes, but I did want to just kind of wrap up our session today. It's been so great. With that, I want to remind you that the Reading League, is a grassroots movement. You guys are the grass. We can't do this without all of our collective time, your talent, our talent, and expertise. So we're inviting you now to kind of join the Reading League South Carolina. Our membership term is September 1st through August 31st. Right now we have a discount membership for $25 a year. So that's great. And if you know some undergraduates or even graduates in education, we're offering free membership for students of education so they can become involved and learn best practices. So I wanted to definitely share that with you. We've got that up on these slides. The other thing I also want to share with you, and we're going to be putting this in the chat, is we have 2 events coming up that are pretty exciting. One is going to be a next face-to-face event. It's actually going to be in Greenville on October 19th. It is going to be a mapping multisensory instruction to the foundational skills. We have a cap of 75 individuals that can be involved with that. So we're going to pop the link for registration in that, and we'll be posting that on our website very soon. Also, we will be starting a book study in November, and we are going to be doing Anita Archer's Explicit Instruction book. There's so much to dive into. That's what we wanted to study after this event. We wanted to be able to get in and be able to evaluate our own with that. So we'll be popping those in the chat. We'll also be sending them out in emails and posting it on the Reading League website. So I got a question, Melanie. Are student SLPs get free membership for the Reading League if they're undergrads in speech language pathology?
Indeed.
All right, you guys got the answer right there. And Dr. Archer, everybody on here wants to just thank you so much for your time and your expertise. But when we got started and you got on here, I was texting my friends, I'm fangirling right here with Dr. Archer. So we want to thank you for that. I know you're all at the busy Saturday. If you need to leave, that would be great. If you join our branch, you're only joining the South Carolina branch. You're automatically part of the Reading League National, but each branch has their own membership. All right, with that. So we recorded it, but I don't believe it's something we can share. That was my belief the first time, and I think we'll have to get a answer on that. For those of you who asked it, we will be sending out the slides. We will also do our best to, in that follow-up email, include links to articles that Dr. Archer mentioned during the presentation. So you'll have those as well with that. So I'm so glad you came. I'm glad you learned a lot. I did. Anybody else who wants to stay on, you can join our book study even if you are out of state. Okay, it will be virtual. Just follow us on Facebook. All right. All right, so I'm going to let those who wanted to stay on and listen to other questions or pop questions on here until Dr. Archer says, I'm sorry, I have to go.
I have a meeting at 9, so I have 15 minutes. And so invite me back when you finish up the book study and I'll answer questions again.
Okay. Yay! You just made like the happy dance go on everywhere.
Is that a promise?
So we'll get working on that, mapping it out and setting that date too. With it. So
Dr. Archer, how is your cello?
You know, my cello is good. My cello is beautiful, and
I don't remember you named your cello. I can't remember what you named your cello.
Sweetness.
Sweetness. And how is Sweetness doing?
Sweetness is doing extraordinarily well.
And how is Sweetness's player doing?
You know, I have, unfortunately, an autoimmune disease that affects my hands. And so I'm trying to get that healed so I can go back to playing cello. But right now, holding the bow is a challenge. And typing, my hands say, Anita, for 56 years, you've typed hours every day. But it's going to be healed, and then we'll be back to it. So she's waiting for me. My beautiful 1772 cello from England.
Yeah, the cello story is one in a million. I love it.
Yeah, it was. She is beautiful too. You know what's interesting about her, Melanie, is that you know how if you watch the orchestra and they're constantly tuning it, she keeps her tune for 6 to 8 months, depending if there's no weather change.
Oh,
and string instruments don't do that. So she's very sweet. Yeah.
I was wondering if we were going to see Sweetness somewhere in your background.
No, this is one of my offices in my building.
We'll have to put in a special request that Sweetness is in the background when we have you back after the book study.
Okay. Certain Sweetness is there.
Mm-hmm.
So